Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Today, we will be discussing Book 2, Chapter 8 of Deadhouse Gates, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 1 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is most definitely not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Just know that Kamraun and I know that this series is the best fantasy series ever written, and we're approaching this from a purely fanboy point of view. There's not going to be literary critique, at least not about this series. Just love, baby.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Quick warning, today's episode contains scenes of coruscating sorceress violence, so today's episode is not recommended for children.
Our show is listener supported. If you would like to support us, we'd really appreciate it. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we are posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we would really like to hear from you, so send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
We have an addition today.
I'd like to give a huge shout out to one of our Patreon supporters, he's one of our first ones, I believe, the great Dane.
Yes.
I received 2 amazing patches from him. One of them was Ewoks Expeditions, yub, and probably just to aggravate me, I'm not sure, but I love it. But the other one is this really sick Bone Hunters patch. I mean, it is absolutely sick. And Dane, I really appreciate that, brother. I will wear these both with pride, so thank you so much.
Yeah, Dane sent me the same Bone Hunters patch a while ago and a Bridge Burners patch. I have the Bone Hunters patch on my weighted rucksack that I wear around when I'm exercising.
Right.
Really, really like it.
Yeah,
the messaging of that, for those of you that haven't read it, we'll get into that later because you haven't met the Bone Hunters yet.
Yeah, but it's really appreciated, though.
Yeah, thank you, Dane, as always. We appreciate you listening and your support.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right, Chapter 8, Part 1. The chapter begins with an excerpt. Quote, "It is said that on the night of Kelonved and Dancer's return, Malaz City was a maelstrom of sorcery and dire visitations. It is not a far reach to find one sustained in the belief that the assassinations were a messy, confused affair, and that success and failure are judgments dependent on one's perspective." End quote. And this was an excerpt from Conspiracies in the Imperium by none other than Hebrick himself.
So this is what got him in trouble.
Yeah, I'm sure he had a lot more to say about that.
This is where he hints at her being a screw up at doing the job.
Right.
So it's like that was hinted at in the very first of the book. That's kind of funny.
Her being Lacine.
Yes.
And it is true, quite a bit took place on that night. So much so that it has a book called Night of Knives written by Ian C. Esselmont. I believe that all takes place on that one night, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I read it.
You know, I heard an interesting fan theory about Esselmont and Erikson's name. Have you heard this? They came up with this so they'd be next to each other on the bookshelves?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any validity to that claim. I've seen that a couple times as well.
I could see it. That'd be brilliant if they were that way.
The other thing I had heard was it's Erikson's mother's maiden name.
Oh, okay.
I think he took that.
Okay.
So I'd have to go back and look and see. But yeah.
Interesting.
The idea that he took it so they'd be next to each other on the bookshelf, that's pretty cool.
If they did, that's brilliant. I wouldn't expect nothing less, sir.
We are taken to Duiker, who is still following in the wake of Coltane and the Seventh after their retreat from Hisar. Coltane had surprised them all. He had left the foot soldiers of the Seventh to guard the taking on of water at Dry Spring and led his Wiccans out onto the Odon. 2 hours after sunset, the Wiccans charged the Tethanzi tribesmen. Many Tethanzi led their mounts on foot, and few had time to remount, much less wheel in formation to meet the attack. Though they outnumbered the Wiccans 7-1, they broke and died 100 for every one of Coltane's clan warriors who fell. Within 2 hours, the slaughter was complete.
Wow.
And that is tactical supremacy.
Yeah.
It is amazing kill-to-death ratio for those Wiccans.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. What a brilliant commander. And not just leadership. The average Wiccan here must be worth 20 to 30 guys. Obviously they are. You know, I think we talked about this before. They're elites, basically, all of them, right?
It's an interesting idea because they're tribal people as well.
Yes.
And they're fighting tribal people here. It seems that Coltane has led them in a relatively successful rebel campaign against the Malazan Empire in the past,
Yes.
and he is now fully in the Malazan army.
Yes.
So I believe there is a difference between these two tribes peoples in terms of discipline and tactics,
Yes.
because from what we're seeing on Seven Cities, it's not very cohesive the way they're fighting. And Coltane and the Wiccans, I mean, granted, they're one people as opposed to a number of different tribes joining together.
Yes.
They seem to be way more organized and disciplined than what we're seeing from the people on Seven Cities that are coming together in this whirlwind.
Well, I agree, in particular with the Wiccans here, because this isn't your average Wiccan. This isn't a tribe of Wiccans. Yes, it is, but this is all military. There is no, this isn't families. I'm assuming that a lot of these people, there's probably a bunch of kids and women in here enjoying, glad to be part of the whirlwind. That's so.
I
We got a
didn't
lot of
pick up on the
militia.
women really having a lot to do with the whirlwind from the perspective of who is actually doing the fighting.
Sure, I do see that, but you see youngins getting involved too. Younger men were involved in the
Yes,
fighting, and I'm assuming
I
as a
agree with
chance
that.
to prove themselves as well amongst the tribal people. I'm assuming this would be a big thing. So
Yeah, I think part of it might be I'm looking at them as kind of an Arab type culture
I
or
was going to
North
say the
African
Arab
type culture.
Spring. Was that what's going to go? I'm sorry. We're
No,
going to.
so more specifically, they generally don't have women fighters
Mhm.
in their military ranks. I'm talking not like modern day, but like back in the day.
Right. Yes.
I don't know if this has any validity to it. It's a fantasy world anyway, but that's
Exactly.
just what I was envisioning is more of that type of
Okay.
Arab culture,
I can see
Islamic
that. Yeah,
type.
I agree. I think that's very close. And I guess this leads to the question with this group with Coltane. I'm assuming you think these fellows are handpicked?
Probably. I mean, his uncle is like his
Yeah,
second in command.
that's true. Yeah, but his uncle is an ornery son of a gun. We know he's a bad boy.
Yeah,
You don't ride with Coltane unless you're somebody.
probably. He's probably
Yeah.
handpicked the people that are here with him.
Well, it shows. These guys are awesome, dude. I
Hmm.
think me and you just love the Wiccans so much. We gush every time we talk about them.
Yeah, and we're just now between the last couple chapters starting to see why.
Yeah.
Because every time they get involved in any of this kind of stuff, they come out on top.
Yeah.
Duiker had seen the glow from the Tethanzi's burning wagons way off on his right as he rode to the oasis. It was a long moment before he grasped what he was seeing. He dared not ride into the conflagration. The Wiccans rode the blood of butchery. They would not pause to think before taking him down. Instead, he swung his mount northwest and rode at a canter until he ran into the first of the fleeing Tethanzi, from whom he gleaned the story. The Wiccans were demons. They breathed fire. Their arrows magically multiplied in midair. Their horses fought with uncanny intelligence. A Mesla ascendant had been conjured and sent to 7 cities, and now faced the whirlwind goddess. The Wiccans could not be killed. There would never come another dawn. What a picture this paints. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
And I appreciate hearing this from the perspective of somebody that just went through some harrowing experience like this.
Yeah, they got the fear-respect thing going for Coltane. He's generated amongst his enemies here. I love it.
Yeah, legendary status.
Yes.
Duiker left the man and resumed his journey to the oasis. He had lost 2 hours, but had gleaned invaluable information. Duiker realized this was more than the simple lashing out of a wounded, tormented beast. Coltane clearly did not view the situation in that way. Perhaps he never did. The Fist was conducting a campaign, engaged in a war, not a panicked flight. Duiker thought, the leaders of the apocalypse had better reorder their thoughts if they're to hold any hope of wresting the fangs from this serpent. More, they'd better kill the notion, evidently already rampant, that the Wiccans were more than just human, and that's easier said than done. Yeah, once those whispers start, they won't go away. The legend will grow.
Yes, it will. It'll grow and it'll hurt you because your people will be afraid to face him.
Once you start getting into that legendary status.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of Braveheart.
Yeah.
Some of the stories that were floating around about those guys.
Oh, my word. We bring this up every time. It's been so long. I need to watch that again. It's such a great movie.
Yeah.
I'm like you. I think we've talked about I love the first half of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Love the first half to death. I can watch that always over and over and over. And it's the second half is always hard.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes in a movie with horses is in that. There's a really good scene where the horses are charging them, and
Oh
the
my
way it's
word.
put together with the music, it's slow motion.
The spears, you talk about the spear scene?
Yeah,
Dude,
that whole build up to that is a really well done
it
scene.
is.
And he directed that, actually.
Yes.
Now that I think about it.
You,
Yeah.
you know what's funny? Did you ever see We Were Soldiers?
Yes. I'm thinking of the napalm scene. Ooh.
Oh my God. I'll tell you the truth about that in just a second. My uncle told me about this. Okay. He was there. He's seen it. Okay. Give me a second. That's the same writer as Braveheart who wrote We Were Soldiers. There is that connection with that writer, with that story. But the napalm scene, yeah, you talking about the meat coming off the bone?
I just remember one guy got hit by napalm and they had to
Mm.
like use a knife to stop it from spreading or something, and it was just horrible.
It's horrible because my uncle said that stuff. He was in Vietnam, so he's seen it. He said he's seen that stuff firsthand, and he goes that was his Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
For the Vietnam era, that's what that movie is for the Vietnam boys. So that made it that much more real to me when he said that. I was like, oh, okay. I watched it with a little more gravity next time I saw it, so and more appreciation.
That brings up a good question. Was there ever one for the Korean War? Because it seems like they've made
MASH.
movies.
MASH.
It's not like, see, you can't put MASH and Saving Private Ryan in the same category.
No. I'm talking about, but it's the only movie I can think of that's about the Korean War. In all honesty, there's got to be that, and the Manchurian Candidate, and that.
Okay.
If you see the original Manchurian Candidate?
No. Did you say it was Frank Sinatra in that one? I
Yeah,
think we talked about it before.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they're taken over. They're captured in Korea. These men are captured in the Korean conflict, and then they're taken into Manchuria where the brainwashing is done, and then it cuts to where the war's over. They're back in America, and then and once if this programming is in fact intact, once they get back to America. But that's about the only thing I could think of, and it's not realistic. I mean, maybe I don't know. Mind control could be real. I don't know. But I don't know of any good Korean ones. Yeah, if anybody knows, please reach out to us at contact@horsefrogproductions.com. We'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, it just seems like that's a forgotten war.
It is.
You know?
You're correct on that. I think you're quite right. It's and sadly so.
Yeah, because the conflicts that have come after that, like we've had Desert Storm stuff, we've had Afghanistan stuff. It feels like the major conflicts that we've had since then, that every war has some type of movie.
Yeah, exactly. There's something tied to this, but there's not a really good one for Korea that I'm aware of.
While chemist Rello still retained superior numbers, the quality of the troops was beginning to tell. The Wiccans were disciplined in their mayhem, and the 7th was a veteran force that Coltane had taken pains in preparing for this kind of war. But all these minor victories couldn't win the war. Rello's potential recruits numbered in the hundreds of thousands if Shaikh decided to reinforce him. When Duerker came within sight of the small oasis surrounding Dry Spring, he was shocked to see that almost every palm tree had been cut down. The stands were gone, leaving only stumps and low plants. Smoke drifted over the area, ghostly under the paling sky. Duerker rose in his stirrups, scanning for campfires, pickets, the tents of the encampment. Nothing. Perhaps on the other side of the spring. The smoke thickened as he rode into the oasis, his mount picking its way around the hacked stumps. There were signs everywhere. First, the pits dug into the sand by the outlying picket stations, then the deep ruts where the wagons had been positioned in a defensive line. In the hearth places, only smoldering ashes remained. Duerker let his horse wander through the abandoned camp. The deep sinkhole beyond was the spring. It had been virtually emptied and was now only beginning to refill. A small brownish pool surrounded by the mud-coated husks of palm bark and rotting fronds. Even the fish had been taken. While the Wiccan horse warriors had set off to ambush the Tithanzi, the 7th and the refugees had already left the oasis. Duerker struggled to comprehend that fact. Coltane gave them no rest, no pause to assimilate the shock, to come to terms with all that had happened. They had arrived, stripped the oasis of water and everything else that might prove useful, then they'd left. Duerker asked himself, where? And nudged his mount forward. He came to the oasis's southwestern edge and observed the signs of departure. Off to the southeast rose the weathered range of the Lador Hills. Westward stretched the Tithanzi Steppes. Nothing in that direction until the Sakala River. Too far for Coltane to contemplate. If northwest, then the village of Manat, and beyond that, Karantapasi on the coast of the Karis Sea. almost as far as Sakala River. The trail led due west, into the steppes. Hood's breath. There's nothing there. There seemed little point in trying to anticipate Coltane's actions. Duiker wheeled back to the spring and stiffly dismounted. He could go no further, nor could his horse. They needed to rest, and they needed the soupy water at the bottom of the lake bed. He removed his bedroll from the saddle, tossing it onto the leaf-strewn sand. Unhitching the mare's girth strap, he slid the ornate saddle from its sweat-covered back. Taking the reins, he led the animal down to the water. The spring had been plugged with rocks, which explained its slow trickle. They thought of everything, didn't they? Plug in the spring so that it wouldn't fill.
Yeah, brilliant. Scorched earth tactics all the way around here. Just absolutely amazing. Yeah, and British, their enemies, even if they get the water back, it's going to take weeks, if not months, to recover any water that's usable for a big group.
Right. Duiker removed his scarf and strained the water through the fabric into his helmet. He let the horse drink first, then repeated the filtering process before quenching his own thirst and refilling his canteen. I thought it was interesting that he let the horse drink first.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I love these guys and their horses. The way, because your horse is your life out here, man. Traveling like this, you better take care of your horse first, because you might have to get up and run. And so it'd be better to have your horse watered and rested a little bit, so worst case scenario, he's at least got a little energy back so he can run for you.
Mm-hmm. He fed the mare from the bag of grain strapped to the saddle, then rubbed the beast down before turning his attention to setting up his camp. He wondered whether he would ever rejoin Coltane in the army. Duiker laid out the bedroll, then rigged over it a sunshade using his talaba. Without the trees, the sun would scorch this oasis. It would be years in recovering, if it ever did. Before sleep took him, he thought long on the war to come. Cities meant less than did sources of water. Armies would have to occupy oases. Coltane would ever be at a disadvantage, his every destination known, his every approach prepared for, provided chemist Rello can get to them first. And how can he fail in that? He doesn't have thousands of refugees to escort. For all the Fist's surprises, Coltane was tactically constrained. The question Duiker asked himself before falling asleep was, how long could Coltane delay the inevitable? He awoke at dusk, and 20 minutes later was on the trail. This topic of armies having to march from water to water reminds me of a speech Saladin gave in Kingdom of Heaven. He said virtually the same thing. Do you remember that?
I've not seen that movie.
I thought you were a Ridley Scott fan.
I am, but it's sadly, I've not seen as much Ridley Scott because some of his stuff does not really intrigue me at times, and I don't remember that coming out till it's way after the fact. And then it's kind of one of those, I meant to watch it, but I just keep forgetting. I still haven't watched Wrath of Man, and the one my father's been on me to watch, which I'm really surprised. Him and my mother both love The Covenant, that Guy Ritchie film about Jake Gyllenhaal and the Interpreter.
I've heard some good stuff about that.
Dude, my dad and mom just were overwrought by how good that movie was, and they were on me to watch that. I'm like, I can't believe my parents watched the Guy Ritchie movie and loved it. It's like, all right, so it must be a pretty good movie.
That's a little bit different than his normal movies, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It seems quite lovely, though. They said the story is really powerful, and the fact that there's several of these people still in hiding, that are the ones that haven't been found and killed.
Mm-hmm.
They said it's very powerful.
I think Kingdom of Heaven would be of interest to you. Okay. Because it's about the Crusades.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, because the Crusades do interest me.
It has a lot of good actors in it. You need to watch the extended version if you do watch it, because the theatrical cut cuts out a significant amount of story that is relevant to the character development.
I'm always down with the director's cut of anything.
Yeah. It's like a 3-hour movie. But okay, so back to my point. Saladin, he's the leader of the Islamic forces that are marching on Jerusalem, and he gets in an argument with one of the people that's particularly bloodthirsty in his camp, and he's talking about how he has to march the army from water to water, basically.
Right. Okay.
And it really reminded me of this, because this is the same type of environment that this stuff with Coltane's going on.
Yes.
So they have to think about logistically how they're going to have water for all these people and animals as they travel across this environment.
Yeah. When I think of desert army movies, the only thing I have to draw upon is Lawrence of Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a personal favorite because I'm fascinated by T.E. Lawrence.
What about The Mummy?
Well, okay. I love
Brendan
The Mummy
Fraser.
too. I love Brendan Fraser.
You get a little bit of that, right?
Yeah, I love anything. Well, so much so, you know me, I love the Egyptian theme stuff. And I always love Prince of Persia. but I just got Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is going back to the Egyptian motif, I think.
Not Egyptian. It's happening in Saudi Arabia, I think.
Ooh.
And it's supposed to be going back to the roots of the series where
That's what I was
it's
told.
more stealth-based action as opposed to Spartan combat or any of the open world stuff that we're used to seeing.
Valhalla is a bloodbath game. It's really quite funny. It's so different than other Assassin's Creed because their little arms and heads and legs come off. First time I saw that, I was like, hey, what's that on the ground? It's like some fella I just hit with an axe. Well, his head came off. It's like, oh, sorry. It's like, your head's off, dude.
All right. We go to Felicin, Hebrick, and Bodin, who had reached the coast. Breakers rolled over a reef a quarter of a mile out. The sun's rise was an hour away. Felicin stood on a grassy shelf overlooking a vast beach of white sand, lightheaded and weaving slightly as the minutes passed. There was no boat in sight, no sign that anyone had ever set foot on this stretch of coast. Driftwood and heaps of dead seaweed marked the tide line. Sand crabs crawled everywhere she looked. Beside her, Hebrick said, well, at least we can eat. Assuming those are edible, that is, and there's only one way to find out. She watched as he made his way down onto the sand. She warned, watch those claws. Wouldn't want to lose a finger, would we? Hebrick laughed and continued on. She could see him only because of his clothes. His skin was now completely black. The visible changes were matched by other, more subtle ones. Bodin said, you can't hurt him anymore, no matter what you say. Felicin said, then I've no reason to stay quiet. It's nice to see that she's dialed back the nastiness.
I don't know if someone's dialed it back or the person she's trying to hurt just didn't care.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I was joking more than anything. She's just so nasty, this section.
Yeah, she's particularly rough in this chapter, especially in part 2 that we will get to.
They had enough water for 1 to 2 days. The clouds over the straits promised rain, but Felicin knew every promise was a lie. Salvation was for others. She looked around again and thought, this is where our bones will rest. Humps and ripples in the sand. Then one day, even those signs will be gone. We've reached the shore, where Hood awaits and no one else. A journey of the spirit as much as of the flesh. I welcome the end to both. Bodin had pinched the tents and was now collecting wood for a fire. Hebrick returned with a sackcloth full of crabs. The tips of claws showed through the bag's loose weave. He said, these will either kill us or make us very thirsty. I'm not sure which will be worse. The last fresh water was 11 hours behind them. They'd had to dig down an arm span to find it, and it had proved brackish, tasting of iron and difficult to keep down. Felicin asked, do you truly believe Duiker's still out there, sailing back and forth for, 5 days now? Hebrick squatted and said, he's not published anything in years. What else would he have to do with all this time? She asked, do you think frivolity is the proper way to meet Hood? Hebrick replied, I didn't know there was a proper way, lass. Even if I was certain death was coming, which I'm not, at least in the immediate future, well, each of us has to answer it in our own way. After all, even the priests of Hood argue over the preferred manner in which to finally face their god. And I would like to be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations.
You say that, but it sounds like any university philosophy department after about 2 drinks too many.
Yeah. I just think of these stodgy people that have dedicated their lives to this life, this god, and then having differing interpretations on proper process and procedure for greeting and groveling and whatever else.
See, that's what's really funny because, I think a lot of folks envision the fact that Christians have a bunch of this, and that's through certain groups in particular. And I'm not saying this to be insulting to my Catholic brethren or anything, but they're what we call high church. They have a lot of ritual in their service. And like I say, this is a point of fact, not as an insult. And so I think for some of those folks, they argue like that. I myself am one of these guys that's more chilled back. It's like, I think the Lord has a sense of humor and doesn't care if we have a sense of humor about dying. I think he prefers us to have a sense of humor about things. He gave us a sense of humor. He's got a sense of humor, I feel. You read the Bible, it's hilarious in a lot of parts. It's really quite funny.
You'll have to tell me about some of that sometime.
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
Because I've, heard a lot of cautionary stuff coming out of it, right?
Sure.
But in terms of comedy, I haven't.
Esther has the funniest comedic moment of all time, and I kid you not. There's a dude that's been a survivor from King Saul. King Saul was supposed to wipe out a whole group. He did not. And this comes back to bite them in the butt about 400, 500, 600 years later when they're in captivity and they're under Artaxerxes. Who's Xerxes? And then 300.
Yeah.
Esther takes place in that time. Okay, her husband is the guy that led the Persians.
Okay.
So he fails at that. Of course, he loses the Battle of Thermopylae, comes back, and this is kind of between the lines, mind you. But he marries Esther. She's Jewish. And then this fellow rises up to exterminate the Jews. And then after all this stuff goes on, when it's about to get real ugly for the Jews that are left, the king has this thing read to him. He goes, he can't sleep, and he reads the record of things that have been done. And this man he failed to acknowledge for saving his life. Well, there's another gentleman, Haman, is out there in the foyer waiting to talk to the king at this moment. And he hates this person that the king is talking about, Mordecai. And he has arranged all this so Mordecai and all his people will be wiped out. They're Jews. But at this moment, the king is really happy on this guy, Mordecai. And so this fella comes in, Haman comes in to tell him about his plan. And the king says, what should I do to somebody, for somebody who has done this great service to me? And Haman thinks he's talking about himself, not his enemy. And he says, I would put him on your horse, put him in your robe, put your crown on his head, and everyone is will see that he's, has your blessing and that he's your number 2 man. And he says, all right, make it so. Go do that to that guy, to Mordecai. And he realized, because he was arranging Mordecai's death, and on the gallows that he made, he himself ended up being hanged. So it's... Dude, there is some.
So it's an ironic comedy.
It's ironic comedy, but it's hilarious when you read it. Though I'm sorry, it's hilarious.
Okay.
It's outright hilarious. So I'm sorry. Was it funny for Haman?
A misunderstanding.
Yes. Well, in South Park, Haman was the leader of that group. Remember the night they go to the Moses, and he's the leader of the anti-Semitic Jews.
Oh my God. I don't know if I've seen that episode, but
it's the night of the comet, the hot tub, and the Jubilee.
Oh, that's like season 1,
2,
man. That's like episode
1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's old,
real early.
Cool. But yeah, Haman is the leader of the anti-Semitic group. Yeah. So yeah, that's okay. That episode.
All right. Felicin said, if I'd known a lecture was coming, I'd have kept my mouth shut. Hebrick said, coming to terms with life as an adolescent, are you? When she scowled, it made him laugh in delight, as it would.
It's funny, man.
She thought, Hebrick's favorite jokes are the unintended ones. Mockery is just hate's patina, and every laugh is vicious. The last laugh won't be yours, Hebrick. You'll discover that soon enough. You and Bodin both. Yes, Professor Chaos will make you pay. Yes. It's just like Butters. Just like scheming.
I'm flashing back to last week's episode or the week before where you told me about one of your children going, you will pay.
You will pay for that.
You will pay for that. Oh my good gracious.
It gets me every time, dude.
It's amazing, dude. But the question is now that you've brought this up, is for Felicin, is that did the Simpsons already do it?
Probably.
I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
Oh.
They cooked the crabs in a bed of coals. The white flesh was delicious, but salty. A bounteous feast and an endless supply that could prove fatal.
Now, a real quick aside, I forgot to bring this up a minute ago. Does this ever remind you of something else? Coming out of the desert onto a sea and crabs?
Yeah, that's got to be Gunslinger, right?
Yeah, right on. Drawing of the Three. I have this. Exactly what I'm thinking right here is Drawing of the Three.
Mm-hmm. I hadn't put those two together until you said that, and then I'm like, oh yeah,
absolutely.
And then that quip about be careful, you don't want to lose any fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all particularly relevant in that book. Now those crabs, they were like big crabs, right? Like the size of a dog or something.
Yes.
Yeah, they were huge.
Yeah, they were some jacked up dudes.
Yeah. Some other book podcasters, I forget who it is. They're on Twitter. They're going through Gunslinger right now.
Oh, right on, dude.
Yeah.
If we cover that, which I have no problem, I would rather start on because I had a hard time reading Gunslinger. I had my friend recommended.
It's quick though. Just knock that out real quick.
But I kind of like starting on Drawing of the Three and then coming back to it for some reason.
Well, we could talk about that in about 6 years.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we'll probably
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if it's astronaut stuff, probably longer,
Yeah.
actually.
This could be the next
Yeah.
decade.
Yeah. And then you'll have a debate about whether you want to do Dune
Right. It's going to be
or
that's a hard one. It's
that.
Dune or Gunslinger.
Got to have a vote.
Yeah.
The Patreon subscribers
That's,
get to vote on that. Yeah.
keep that in mind, folks. We're looking for y'all 10 years from now.
Bodden then collected more driftwood to build a beacon fire for the night to come. In the meantime, he piled damp seaweed on the fire and studied with a satisfied expression the column of smoke that rose into the air. Phillison asked, "You planning to do that all day?" She thought, "What about sleep? I need you sleeping, Bodden." Bodden said, "Every now and then." Phillison said, "Don't see the point if those clouds roll in." Bodden replied, "They ain't rolled in yet, have they? If anything, they're rolling out, back to the mainland." She watched him working the fire and noted there was now a sloppiness in his movements that betrayed the extremity of his exhaustion. The crab meat began taking its toll. Waves of desperate thirst assailed Phillison, followed by sharp cramps as her stomach rebelled at being full. Hebrick disappeared inside his tent, clearly suffering the same symptoms. Phillison did little over the next 20 minutes, simply clawing through the pain and watching Bodden, willing on him the same affliction. If he was similarly assailed, he showed no sign. Her fear of him deepened. He's resolute as always. Amazing self-control on this guy.
Dude, he is something, and I love his control too. I wish I could have some of that control. I don't know if I do or don't, but I admire him, in this situation. But I like how he continues to just aggravate her so badly just by his very existence.
On the topic of wanting to have stronger self-control, that's a muscle you can exercise.
Yeah, that's true. I taught myself that over certain things. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
You just got to practice little by little and you'll build it up.
That's right. Next on our self-help course at Horse Frog.
So we got the Horse Frog Wedding Chapel.
Yes.
Life lessons from Horse Frog Productions.
Yes. Yes. Counseling. Along to go, we have more counseling.
Yeah. Counseling. Yeah.
We add more features to our counseling menus as we go.
I got to add that section to the website. Man, I got a laundry list of things to add to the website.
Yeah. Dude, the web. I hate the web. Hate the web. It's like, oh my gosh. I tried to do something like for us on Facebook, and it's like I got no control over that thing. I don't know what's going on there.
That's particularly difficult through that business management solution thing that they have. You would not believe how long it took me to get Instagram and Facebook linked to the same account. It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Wow.
Either way, that's not listener problems. Let's move on. I did have a comment on these cramps that they're feeling. This is one of the dangers of eating too much food if you haven't been eating in a while. It's this weird dichotomy where you're starving, you're craving food, but if you eat too much too fast, you make yourself sick. Yeah. I experienced this myself after my first prolonged fast, where I was just, after like 3 or 4 days, you're just like, everything sounds delicious and you're planning your first meal and all this stuff. And even if you ease into it with some type of like bone broth or something, you're still ravenous, and then you want to hammer down, and then you're sick. It's easy to overdo it too fast.
I could see that. And like I say, I've heard about this. I knew it was possible, but I've never thankfully experienced this. So
yeah, I mean, you have to go for a long time without food before it really becomes a problem. Like you could go 24 hours, no problem. It wouldn't be an issue. Right. We're talking, like 72 hours or more without eating. Yeah.
Yeah.
The cramps faded, although the thirst remained. The clouds over the straits retreated and the sun's heat rose. Bodden dumped a last pile of seaweed on the fire, then made ready to retire to the tent. Phillison said, "Take mine." Bodden's head jerked around. His eyes narrowed. She said, "I'll join you in a moment." He still stared. She snapped, "Why not? What other escape is there, unless you've taken vows?" He flinched almost imperceptibly. Phillison went on. "Sworn to some sex-hating ascendant. Who would that be? Hood? Wouldn't that be a surprise? But there's always a little death in lovemaking." Bodden muttered, "That what you call it? Lovemaking?" She shrugged. He said, "I'm sworn to no god." Phillison said, "So you've said before, yet you've never made use of me, Bodden. Do you prefer men? Boys? Throw me on my stomach and you won't know the difference." He straightened, still staring, his expression unreadable. Then he walked to her tent. She smiled to herself, waited 100 heartbeats, then joined him. His hands moved over her clumsily, as if he was trying to be gentle but did not know how. He was rough, but not as rough as Benneth had been, nor a good number of Benneth's followers. He was quickly done, settling his considerable weight on her, his breath harsh and heavy in her ear. She did not move him. Her every sense was attuned to his breathing, to the twitching of muscles as sleep stole upon him. She had not expected him to surrender so easily. She had not anticipated his helplessness. Felissen's hands stole into the sands beside the pallet and found the grip of the dagger. She willed calm into her own breathing, though she could do nothing to slow her hammering heart. He was asleep. He did not stir. She slipped the blade free and shifted her grasp to angle the point inward. She drew a deep breath, held it. His hand caught her wrist the instant she began her thrust. He rose fluidly and wrenched her arm around, then twisted her until she rolled onto her stomach beneath him. His weight pinned her down. She actually tried to kill him. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm kind of impressed that she had the will to actually attempt this.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, I mean, the fact that she's not just all talk. I mean, hey, she may not be good at it, but at least she gave it the old try. And I'm like, well, they kind of. She's talking about revenge. She went for it. It's like it or not, like her or not. At least she kind of backed up her mouth.
Okay.
Not well, but I mean, she at least she gave it a shot. So
she did the best she could do as an untrained adolescent.
Yeah, exactly.
Bodden squeezed her wrist until the dagger fell free. He whispered, "You think I don't check my gear, lass? You think you're a mystery to me? Who else would steal one of my throat stickers?"
It's certainly not a Haboric no hands. Sorry.
Yeah. Felicen, that's good, actually. Felicen said, "You left Benneth to die." She couldn't see his face and was almost glad for that when he replied. Bodden said, "No, lass, I killed the bastard myself. Snapped his neck like a reed. He deserved more pain, something slower, but there wasn't any time for that. He didn't deserve the mercy, but he got it." She asked, "Who are you?" Bodden said, "Never done a man or a boy, but I'll pretend. I'm good at pretending." Felicen said, "I'll scream." He responded, "Hebrick's sleep isn't the kind you can shake him out of. He dreams. He thrashes about. I've slapped him and he didn't stir. So scream away. What are screams anyway? Voicing your outrage. Didn't think you were capable of outrage anymore, Felicen." She felt the hopelessness flood through her body and thought, it's just more of the same. I can survive it. I can even enjoy it if I try. Bodden rose and she writhed onto her back. He'd collected the dagger and head back to the entrance. He smiled and said, "Sorry if I disappointed you, but I wasn't in the mood." She asked, "Then why?" He said, "To see if you're still what you were." He did not need to voice his conclusion. He told her, "Get some sleep, lass." Felicen curled up and felt the numbness filling her. She thought, "To see if you're still..." Yes, you still are. Bodden knew that already. He just wanted to show you to yourself, girl. You thought you were using him, but he was using you. He knew what you planned. Think on that. Think on it long and hard. This is one of the worst things that she's done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. She's but I agree that there's appears to be something left in there of her. Some of Felicen Perrin, not this hateful little thing that came out of Skullcap.
I think what I particularly don't like about it is, okay, so she attempted to kill him, but the fact that like she's still using her body to lure people into this kind of stuff, I don't know, that whole scenario, especially like with Bodden, she hates him, but he's done a lot for her that she can't see.
Yes, yeah. This also can. Well, we're saying too much here, but later, the stuff that she tried, she's just awful, and this kind of doesn't. I want this to go away in her, but I don't think we'll be rewarded with that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it doesn't go away in people.
No, sometimes, yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, she's been damaged so bad, that poor. She is a victim, and we've all agreed to that. But it's like, okay, enough of the victim thing already. At some point, you're a victim. At some point, you start diving into your own victimhood.
Yeah, I think of all the stuff that she did, this was the most disturbing one to me.
It is. Her being that way, it's like with you on this road, y'all are carrying her helping her escape, and this is what it's kind of like. I'm assuming for him, it's got to be like this is the thanks I get is this nasty little snake all the way from here
Mm.
to from point A to point B, and she's nothing but a nasty little thing the whole time.
I often wondered why he went into her tent to begin with, and part of me thinks she just wouldn't shut up about it until he did, probably.
Probably so. Probably so. And he knew that. He knew she
Yeah,
would. He's not a
she would
fool.
just nag him to death until he did something. I don't
Oh,
think she would have let it
no, no.
go.
She's not subtle. Yeah.
Yeah. Hood came striding out of the waves, the reaper of carved out souls. He'd waited long enough, his amusement at their suffering losing its flavor. Time had come for the gates. Feeling bleached and withered as the dead driftwood around her, Felicin sat facing the straits. Clouds flickered over the water. Lightning danced to the rumbling beat of thunder. An hour earlier, Hebrick and Bodden had come back from their walk up the beach. They had found the prow of a shattered boat, and they'd talked about building a raft. No one had the strength for such a task. They would start dying by dawn, and they all knew it. Felicin realized that Bodden would be the last to die, unless Hebrick's god returned to scoop up his wayward child. Felicin finally began to believe she would be the first. No vengeance achieved. Not Bodden, not Sister Tavora, not the entire hood-warped Malazan Empire. I imagine she feels cheated at this point.
I agree. But this could be a good thing to realize that you can depend on others. But she, at this point, there's no hope for them that they know about yet. But the question is, if she survives this stuff, would she learn a lesson from it? And I think we know the answer to that, though.
Mm-hmm. A strange wave of lightning leapt up beyond the reef. It played out, tumbling and pitching as if wrapped around an invisible log leagues long and 30 paces thick. Thunder slapped the beach hard enough to shiver the sand. The lightning rolled on, straight toward them. Hebrick was suddenly at her side, his face split wide in a grimace of fear. He yelled, "That's sorcery, lass! Run!" She didn't move and barked a harsh laugh. She yelled, "It'll be quick, old man." Wind howled. Hebrick spun to face the approaching wave. He snarled a curse, then interposed himself between Felicin and the sorcery. Bodden crouched down beside her, his face lit in a blue glow that intensified as the lightning reached the shore, then rolled up to them. It shattered around Hebrick as if he was a spire of rock. He staggered, his tattoos a tracery of fire that flared bright, then vanished. The sorcery was gone. For all its threat, it swiftly died up and down the beach. Hebrick sagged, settling on his knees. He said, "Not me. Odotarl, of course. Nothing to fear. Nothing at all." That'd be pretty cool visual there, seeing that play out.
Yeah.
Where he stands in front of the lightning and protects them like that.
Yeah, that would be really neat. Is he saying that because of what's in him, he negated that? That's how I'm reading that.
Yes.
That's how I was taking it. Okay.
That's how I took it too. Bodden shouted, "There!" A boat had somehow cleared the reef and now raced toward them, its lone sail aflame. Sorcery stabbed at the craft from all sides, then fell away as the boat neared shore. A moment later, it scraped bottom and slid to a halt, canting to one side as it settled. Two figures were at the ratlines in an instant, cutting away the burning sail. The cloth swept down, instantly doused as it struck the water. Two other men leapt down and waded onto shore. Felicin asked, "Which one's Duiker?" Hebrick shook his head and said, "Neither, but the one on the left is a mage." She asked, "How can you tell?" He made no reply. The two men swiftly approached, both staggering in exhaustion. The mage, who we know to be Culp, was the first to speak in Malazan. He said, "Thank the gods, we need your help." And another convergence of storylines. That's always exciting.
I forget that so many paths join up in this book. Like last week with Fiddler, Absolar, and Crocus meeting up with Icarium and Mappo. And I just love that these convergences of storylines is great. I forgot that it happened so much here. We're only on chapter 8, dude. It's been like the second or third convergence of people. It's like, that's so cool.
I think there's like 4 main storylines going on right now.
Yeah.
Something like that. Somewhere beyond the reef waited an unknown mage, a man unconnected to the rebellion, a stranger trapped within his own nightmare. As the vortex of a savage storm, he had risen from the deep on the second day out. Culp had never before felt such unrestrained power. Its very wildness was all that saved them, as the madness that gripped the sorcerer tore and flayed his warren. There was no control. The Warren's wounds gushed. The winds howled with the mage's own shrieks. The Ripath was flung about. At first, Culp countered with illusions, believing he and his companions were the object of the mage's wrath, but it quickly became apparent that the insane wielder was oblivious to them. Culp contracted his own warren into a protective shell around Ripath. Then, as Gessler and his crewmen struggled to keep the craft upright, he crouched down to withstand the onslaught. The unleashed sorcery instinctively hunted them, and no illusion could deceive something so thoroughly mindless. They became its lodestone, the attacks endless, battering Culp relentlessly for 2 days and nights. That would be an absolute nightmare. Being trapped in something like that for 2 days? Imagine the physical and mental toll that it would take on Culp.
I cannot imagine. That's awesome. I mean, I say this to flip it on the other side. This gives me a whole big respect for Culp and his strength to be able to do this for 2 days. And he seems kind of like the butt of the joke with the Wiccans, but with this hardcore group, he's tough as nails. So this kind of gives an insight into the Wiccan warlock strength too.
Yeah.
They weren't disdainful of Culp, but they seemed to kind of.
Well, he didn't really show his power level to them either. He was trying to keep it
That's
low
true.
key.
That's true. He was trying to kind of hide it from them. Maybe something that they wouldn't have liked. I don't know in particular, but. And I guess also
information is power, Billy.
Information is power, and knowing what his warren is, that would be a bad deal for enemies. So I agree. It's like knowing their name.
Yeah. They were driven toward the Odotarl shores. The mage's power assailed that coastline with little effect, and Culp finally began to make sense of it. The mage's mind must have been destroyed by Odotarl. Likely an escaped miner, a prisoner of war who had scaled the walls only to find he took his prison with him. Losing control of his warren, it had then taken control of him. It surged with power far beyond anything the mage himself had ever wielded. The realization left Culp horrified. He wondered if the same fate awaited him. Gessler and his crew's skill was all that kept the Ripath from striking the reef. For 11 hours, they managed to sail parallel to the razor-sharp rocks beneath the breakers. On the third night, Culp sensed a change. The coastline on the right, which he had felt as an impenetrable wall of negation, the bloodless presence of Odotarl, suddenly softened. A power resided there, bruising the will of the magic deadening ore, pushing it back on all sides. There was a cut in the reef. It gave them their only chance. Rising from where he crouched amidships, Culp shouted to Gessler, who had grasped his meaning instantly, with desperate relief. Another attack came, even as they swept between the jagged breakers, sundering Culp's resistance. Flame lit the storm jib, the lines, the sail. Had any of the men been dry, they would have become beacons of fire. As it was, the sorcery swept over them in a wave of hissing steam, then was gone, striking the shore and rolling up the beach until it fizzled out. Culp had half expected that the strangely blunted effect on this part of shore was in some way connected to the man he was sent to find, and so was not surprised to see 3 figures emerge from the gloom beyond the beach. Weary as he was, something about the way the 3 stood in relation to each other jangled alarms in his head. Circumstances had forced them together, and experience cared little for the bonds of friendship. Yet it was more than that. The motionless ground beneath his feet was making Culp dizzy. When his gaze fell on Hebrick, a wave of relief washed through him, and there was nothing ironic in his call for help. Hebrick answered it with a dried-out laugh. Culp ordered Gessler to get them water. Gessler pulled his eyes from Hebrick with difficulty, then nodded and spun about. Truth had swung down to inspect Ripath's hull for damage, while Stormy sat perched on the prow, his crossbow cradled in his arms. Gessler shouted for one of the water casks. Truth clambered back into the boat to retrieve it. Hebrick asked, "Where's Duiker?" Culp frowned and said, "Not sure. We went our separate ways in a village north of Hisar. The Apocalypse." Hebrick said, "We know. Dosen Pally was ablaze the night we escaped the pit." Culp said, "Yeah, well," and studied the other 2. The big man lacking an ear met his eyes coolly. Despite the ravages of deprivation evident in his bearing, there was a measure of self-control to him that made Culp uneasy. He was clearly more than the scarred dockyard thug he first took him for. The young girl was no less disturbing, though in a way Culp could not define. He sighed and thought, worry about it later. Worry about everything later. A problem for future Culp, as it were.
Agreed.
Do you ever say that at work? That's a problem for future Billy?
No, but it's Now that I'm in the position I am, there's not much of it's always, which now I don't worry about that.
Mm.
I don't have the responsibilities I used to have. So it's mostly show up and do what they tell you to do. So it's kind of nice.
I actually say that quite a bit at work. That's a problem for future Kamraun.
Well, hey, who knows what the day may bring? You may not make it till tomorrow. So
yeah.
It's a terrible. It's not a terrible thought. It's a good. It's like we need to understand this. So there's a chance that you may get lucky one day, and the work that you didn't do, it's like you'll be glad you didn't do it because you won't have wasted your time doing it.
Yeah, people change their minds all the time.
Yeah, they do.
Truth arrived with the water cask, Gessler a step behind him. The three escapees converged on Truth as he breached the cask, then held the tin cup that was tied to it and splashed it full of water. Culp said, "Go slow on that. Sips, not gulps." As he watched them drink, Culp sought out his warren. It felt slippery, elusive, yet he was able to take hold, stealing power to bolster his senses. When he looked again upon Hebrick, he almost shouted in surprise. Hebrick's tattoos swarmed with a life of their own. Flickering waves of power raced across his body and spun a hand-like projection beyond the stump of his left wrist. That ghost hand reached into a warren, was clenched as if gripping a tether. A wholly different power pulsed around his right stump, shot through with veins of green and odotaral red, as if two snakes writhed in mortal combat. The blunting effect arose exclusively from the green bands, radiating outward with what felt like conscious will. That it was strong enough to push back the effects of the odotaral was astonishing.
I feel like going Mortal Kombat. Sorry. Whenever you say Mortal Kombat, I apologize.
And you have to have the song that goes with it, right?
Yeah.
You know the song from the movie?
I can't. I don't know this. I didn't see the movie.
Oh, Billy, come on. You can't just go Mortal Kombat and then not have the song that goes with it. Yeah.
That's all I know about it is Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
Or
okay.
Get over here. Get over here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do know. Finish him.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I got. Sorry.
I was more of a Killer Instinct guy than Mortal Kombat, but I get all the references.
I was Altered Beast and Tekken. So I was not very
okay.
Not very good.
Altered Beast wasn't really a fighting game, though, was it? That was like a side scroller.
It was a side scroller, a weird side scroller involving lycanthropy and other things.
Rise from your grave.
Yeah,
was that supposed to be Zeus at the beginning?
I think so. I command you to rise from the grave and rescue my daughter. Isn't it?
Yeah.
You got to rescue. Yeah.
I remember that game being in an arcade.
Yes.
When I was growing up, and I remember that playing at the beginning.
I never played it in the arcade. I played it on the Genesis because it was such and Mortal Kombat were such good ports on the Genesis. They looked just like the arcade versions did. So
that was the big thing was Genesis had red blood and the Super Nintendo didn't have red blood.
No. We couldn't have blood.
They didn't have Altered Beast at all. That was a Sega game. But the Mortal Kombat port on the Super Nintendo.
No blood. Or no red blood.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
Denul healers often describe diseases as waging war, with the flesh as the battleground, which their warren gave them sight to see. Culp wondered if he wasn't seeing something similar, but not a disease, a battle of warrens, Feiner's own, linked by one ghostly hand, the other ensnared by Odotarl. It was a warren Culp couldn't recognize, a force alien to every sense he possessed. He blinked. Hebrick was staring at him, a faint smile on his broad mouth. Culp demanded, "What in Hood's name has happened to you?" Hebrick shrugged and said, "I wish I knew." The three Marines now approached Hebrick. One said, "I'm Gessler. We're all that's left of the Boar cult." Hebrick's smile faded, and he said, "That would make 3 too many." He turned away and strode off to retrieve a pair of backpacks. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, especially with these fellas.
Yeah, I mean, I know Hebrick's had a rough time with Feiner.
Yes.
But these poor dudes probably could have had a little bit of better treatment.
Yeah. He could have been a little more sympathetic.
Yeah. Gessler recovered quickly and stared after him, expressionless. Truth had gasped at the harsh words of a man he took to be his god's priest. Culp saw something crumbling into ruins behind his light blue eyes. Stormy revealed the dark clouds that likely gave reason to his name, but he laid a hand on Truth's shoulder a moment before facing the one-eared man. Stormy growled, "Your hands keep hovering over those hidden blades and I'm going to get nervous," and shifted the grip on his crossbow. Wow. Phillison said, "That's Bodden. He murders people. Old women, rivals, you name them, he's got their blood on his hands. Isn't that right, Bodden?" Without awaiting a reply, she went on, "I'm Phillison of House Perrin, last in the line, but don't let any of that fool you." That's about what we can expect from her at this point.
Oh, yeah. Yes. She's just dreadful. We can't say it enough. Yes, she's a victim. Yes, she's a victim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But yes,
Yeah.
she's an awful person. And that's on her.
I mean, she could have added, to the end of that whole thing about Bodin. Oh, and I slept with you. All this horrible stuff that you've done. But yeah, I still slept with you.
And I tried to kill you, but hey.
Hebert returned with a pack slung over each forearm. He set them down, then moved close to Culp and said, "We're in no shape to help you, but after crossing this damned desert, the thought of death by drowning is oddly appealing. What's out there?" Culp said, "Imagine a child holding a leash, and at the other end is a hound of shadow. The child's the mage, the hound's his warren. Too long in the mines before making his escape, is my guess. We need to rest before trying to run his storm again." Hebert asked, "How bad are things on the mainland?" Culp shrugged and said, "I don't know. We saw Hisar in flames. Duiker went to rejoin Coltane and the 7th. That old man's got a streak of optimism that'll get him stuck on a sliding bed. I'd say the 7th's history, and so's Coltane and his Wiccans." Those negative waves, man. Just always putting it out there.
It ain't my fault, Hardball. I've done nothing but have good thoughts about that bridge ever since we left.
Was that Moriarty?
Yes. I cannot do that magnificent voice. That ain't my fault, Oddball. I've done nothing but have good thoughts about that bridge ever since we left.
I wonder if my kids will like that movie. Maybe it's too long and boring. This young generation, it's hard to keep them.
It may be that way for my missus. I can't drum up the enthusiasm for her to watch it. I'm going to have to watch it by myself, which is not a bad thing. But I love to share this with her, and her to actually laugh at it and like it would be fantastic. But I think that's expecting too much.
Yeah. Speaking of slow burns, I watched Nope last night. Finally.
Oh, did you?
I watched it with my oldest son because he wanted to watch it.
Okay.
And he sat through it, and it freaked him out pretty good. But I have to say, he's a really good director.
Dude, he's a magnificent director. That's an absolutely great film. And I don't know how much, there's a lot of it. I know that we speak from some Fry's love because that's where Fry's lives. That's where Fry's lives now, is in Nope. That's where it lives.
Commemorated in Nope, made immortal.
Yes.
But outside of the Fry's connection, which, it's a good movie. Trip down memory lane in a way, the uncomfortable way that I felt in many of the scenes, he just is a master manipulator of the audience's emotions.
And what I find particularly entertaining about this, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's certain particular people that are comedic actors who have a deep, deep, deep love for the horror genre. And I'm not sure if you understand this, but you know that Mel Brooks is one of those people. Mel Brooks' love of the horror genre. I mean, if you've seen Young Frankenstein, he loves the old Universal movies with a passion. I mean, that's nothing but a love letter to Frankenstein. But he loves horror movies so much so that he did Brooks Films directed The Fly 2. That's a terrible sequel about the Cronenberg fly, but it's bloody and gnarly. But Brooks hid the Brooks Films name deep in there because he didn't want people going to this movie thinking that, we're seeing Mel Brooks as the Fly. And it's going to be this kind of bloodbathy movie. And wait a minute, that's not what I was expecting. So
yeah, I thought it was going to be a comedy thing about the Fly.
Yes.
Right.
And it's not, but Jordan has magnificent. Jordan Peele. If y'all haven't watched his other people, he's done what was it? Get Out,
and Us. Yeah,
and all are fantastic. But in particular, Nope. I love creature features and I love UFO stuff, and it kind of does a great. It's like his take on UFO. Is that what you'd say? The UFO?
Yeah.
Okay.
Extraterrestrial stuff. Yeah.
Extraterrestrial stuff. Very good. And it also uncomfortably funny, of course, like all his stuff has some of the best uncomfortable funny moments of any movies.
Oh man, the paparazzi stuff with the guy on the I lost it. Okay, we didn't move on.
Yes.
But yeah, it's definitely worth watching.
So what about your son? Did he dig it?
Yeah. Hebert said, that Coltane. When I was chained at the base of the crevasse behind Lacine's palace, I half expected to meet the man as a neighbor. Hood knows there was worthy enough company down there. After a moment, he shook his head and said, "Coltane's alive, mage. You don't kill men like that easily. I would like to know who else was chained down there with him. If he's
Oh, I
talking
know.
about there's worthy enough company down there.
Is he talking about Old Guard? And is this maybe a place where some of the Old Guard may have escaped from? Do you wonder those kind of things too?
I do. What types of people that are worthy company? They
Yeah.
had to have some crazy accomplishments.
Well, I'm thinking of, I know it's the first, I don't know why, for some reason, the names that leap to mind is just the Crusts. One of those crazy, God, there's so many crazy people in this story, man. There's so many legendary characters.
Mm-hmm. Culp said, "If that's true, then I'm bound to rejoin him." Hebrick nodded. Felicin loudly said, "He was excommunicated." Both men turned to see Gessler facing the girl. She continued, "More than that, he's the bane of his own god, of yours, I gather. Beware scorned priests. You'll have to lead your own prayers to Fainor, lads, and I'd advise you to pray, a lot." Hebrick swung back to Culp with a sigh. He said, "You opened your warren to look upon me. What did you see?" Culp scowled. After a moment, he said, "I saw a child dragging a hound as big as a hood-damned mountain in one hand." That's quite the scale increase
I
between
think,
a hound of shadow and a hound the size of a mountain.
yeah, but what's funny with that mountain makes me think about your calculations, makes it more correct.
Yeah, good point. Hebrick's expression tightened. He asked, "And in the other?" Culp said, "Sorry, no easy answer there." Hebrick said, "I'd let go," Culp finished, "if you could." Hebrick nodded. Culp lowered his voice and said, "If Gessler realized," Hebrick said, "he'd cut me loose." Culp said, "Messily." With a faint smile, Hebrick said, "I take it we're understood." Culp said, "Not really, but I'll let it lie for now." That's not very reassuring.
Oh, no, it is not. Not at all.
Hebrick acknowledged Culp with a nod. Culp asked, "Did you choose your company here, Hebrick?" His eyes were on Bodden and Felicin. Hebrick said, I did, more or less. Hard to believe, isn't it?" Culp said, "Walk up the beach with me." After they'd walked a bit, Culp said, "Tell me about them." Hebrick shrugged and said, "You have to compromise to stay alive in the mines. And that which one person thinks of value, another is the first to sell. Cheap. Well, that's what they are now. What they were before," he shrugged again. Culp asked, "Do you trust them?" Hebrick grinned and he said, "Do you trust me, Culp? I know it's too soon to answer that. Yours is not an easy question. I trust Bodden to work with us so long as it's in his interest to do so." Culp asked, "And the girl?" After a long moment, Hebrick said, "No." Culp thought, "Not what I'd expected. This should have been the easy part." He said, "All right." Hebrick asked, "And what are your companions? Those foolish men and their foolish cult." Culp said, "Harsh words for a priest of Fainor." Hebrick corrected him. "An excommunicated priest." The girl spoke the truth. "My soul is my own, not Fainor's. I took it back." Culp said, "Didn't know that was possible." Hebrick said, "Maybe it isn't. Please, I can walk no further, mage. Our journey has been difficult." Culp thought, "You're not the only one, old man." They were silent on the way back to the others. Culp had expected this part of the plan to be relatively straightforward. They would come to the coast. They would find Duiker's friend waiting, or not. He'd fought down his misgivings when Duiker first came to him, asking for help. Idiot. Well, he would take them off this damned island, deposit them on the mainland, and that would be that. It was all he'd been asked to do. The sun was rising, the sorcerous storm over the sea withdrawing from shore to boil back and bruised over the middle of the straits. Food had been brought from Ripath. Hebrick joined his two companions in a silent, tense meal. Culp strode to where Gessler sat watch over his two sleeping soldiers, the three of them beneath a square of sailcloth rigged on 4 poles. It's impressive that he's able to keep watch after that harrowing journey. Him and Stormy are something else.
They are. And this group, well, first fact, that's a professional soldier, I think, sleeping whenever you get a chance. That's what they do. I think
True.
to do that. So it's like you sleep whenever you get a chance to sleep. So you make sure you've got the rest so you can help if you need to. But the other thing is, these are, they're kind of a scary group to me. They're great, fierce comrades. But if you look at them sideways, I think they'd kill you. They don't have a sense of humor about things.
Stormy.
They do, but their humor is different.
Yeah, the humor is internal.
Yes, and mean.
Gessler's scarred face twisted into an ironic grin, and he said, "Fainor's joke, this one." Culp squatted down beside Gessler. He said, "Glad you're enjoying it." Gessler said, "The boar god's humor ain't the laughing kind, mage. Strange, though, I could have sworn the Lord of Summer was here, like a crow on that priest's shoulder." Culp asked, "You felt Fëanor's touch before, Gessler?" Gessler shook his head and said, "Gifts don't come my way. Never did. It was just a feeling, that's all." Culp asked, "Still have it?" Gessler said, "I don't think so. Don't know. Doesn't matter." Culp asked, "How's truth?" Gessler said, "Took it hard. Finding a priest of Fëanor who then turns around and denies us all. He'll be all right. Me and Stormy, we look out for him. Now it's your turn to answer some questions. How are we getting back to the mainland? That damn wizard's still out there, ain't he?" Culp said, "The priest will see us through." Gessler asked, "How's that?" Culp said, "That'd be a long explanation, Corporal, and all I can think of right now is sleep. I'll take next watch." Culp rose and went off to find some shade of his own. We are going to stop here this week, and we'll pick up next week where we left off.
Yes.
For standout moments, I enjoyed learning about the exploits of Coltane in the 7th.
Oh, I know. It's really starting to get hairy there.
Yeah. Specifically, splitting the forces and the highly successful counterattack where the Wiccans decimated the Tethanzi horse warriors is really cool.
Yes. Really cool.
And then the 7th cutting down all the trees at the oasis and draining the pool of water, and then also them blocking the spring that's feeding that pool so that it won't fill so quickly.
Yeah.
Cool to see those tactics.
It is. It's masterful work from Coltane and the entire army here, the Wiccan army. And I wonder if Erikson has used any info from real battles he's read about and used some of this tactics in these stories. I mean, I'm assuming that a lot of that.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, because that's masterful warfare, especially in the desert, where I think a lot of people that would fight there, they stay there and live there. But I don't know if people, when they fight amongst themselves, would ever decimate or tear up their own oasis, but having another group come in there and use that as a tactic against them, that's just really smart.
Yeah. I really liked Bodden seeing through Felissen's ridiculous attempt to kill him.
Oh, I know. I'd love that too. I don't know why I'm always actually nervous that she might succeed for some reason. And I assume his blades are poisoned because she described something being on the blades.
Yeah, it had a caustic smell. They looked bluish.
I'm assuming it's one of that Peralt bunch or something.
It could have been some type of preservative to keep it from rusting too.
That's probably more what it is, more than anything. Now that you look back on it, I think it's probably that. But I love him seeing through that and just faking the sleep and then just snatching the wrist right as she's plunging the blades. Great stuff.
Right when she thought she won.
Yes.
Snatched victory.
You are paying to know.
I like that crazy lightning storm and the idea that mage had been overtaken by his warren. The two-way street of the warren and the mage is an interesting concept.
It is. It makes I know they don't, but parts of me wonders if I know it's just magic leaking out, I guess, through the nearest place or the conduit, but you almost wonder if maybe these warrens have an intelligence to themselves. I'm sure they don't. That would be horrifying if they did.
I'm trying to think if there's any examples where that's the case.
I can't
I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
Is Mother Dark an actual thing, or is she an actual entity? Or I mean, technically she is an entity, but does she have a body?
Right.
Or is she darkness? Is she the warren?
Right. That's a good question. That's a daggum good question, because if she is the warren, then the warren itself would in fact be intelligent.
Right. So we'll have to get to the Carcanos trilogy eventually, and hopefully that'll answer that when we get there.
Hopefully he'll finish it.
He will.
I'm so sorry.
When he finishes the second book in the Karsa trilogy, the God Is Not Willing trilogy, he's working on the third book in the Fall of, I guess it's not Fall of Light, whatever it's called.
It's Fall of Light, Fall of Darkness.
That's a Shadow. It's something in Shadow, because he already did Forge of Darkness, then whatever the light one is, I forget, was Fall of Light, and then he's got the next one's Shadow.
Okay.
I was really impressed with the way Culp was successfully able to protect the Ripath while under assault for 2 days straight.
Yes, that's very impressive, and it gives me a lot of respect. I mean, for Culp, I didn't disrespect him. He's not really shown himself. And this is for him showing. That's like, wow, good first showing.
Mm-hmm.
Very impressive. And
it was neat when Culp used his warren to see Hebrick and actually seeing that he has two hands, though they're sorceress.
I love that. The description of that is so odd. the like holding on to things. They both appear to be
Mm-hmm.
holding on, and the poor guy can't let them go because they're just attached to his stumps. Like
It's
he
like you're
can't.
being electrocuted with a
Yeah,
Warren.
that's nicely put. Very aptly, very appropriate.
You didn't
Very
shut the breaker off before he tried to do
Yeah, locked into it now, buddy. It's like,
Yeah.
you are the connection. It's like,
It's a bad situation to be in.
oh yeah. I love Stormy telling Bawden to keep the hands off the knives, off those hidden knives.
Yeah, it shows you that he's quite observant.
Quite observant. It's like because Bawden has been one of these fellas that we see as above being caught with even that kind of situation. You wouldn't, you would think he would make his way out. These guys wouldn't spot him for who he is, but they know he's more than he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I love seeing the ghost hands, not the phantom pains, but real ghost hands. It reminds me of I saw this terrible meme. It's talking about something about playing RPGs with your buddies and giving yourself a stupid name, and it's Wine Hands is the actual name that they use. Wine Hands. And I'm like, it's a good thing Hebrick's not Wine Hands.
So in this scenario, this person doesn't have a hand, and they're always gripping.
I guess just gripping bottles of wine. Yeah, just it's his name. I don't know if he's actually doing it or.
Okay.
Oh my good gracious! That reminds me of there was How I Met Your Mother. They do there's a game that they play where they duct tape a 40 to each hand.
Oh, okay.
Okay. There's a 40
that
hands.
Get kind of hairy.
Yeah, it's rough. And what do you do when you got to go?
And then finally, for me, the interaction between Gessler, Stormy, Truth, and Hebrick regarding Feiner was interesting.
Yes.
Hebrick was not very sympathetic to these guys.
Not genteel, shall we say.
Yeah.
But I'm particularly fond of these lunatics, Gessler, Stormy, and Truth, and they get those fellas. There's some funny ones. We'll see them later on.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see them later on. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah. All right. Great job tonight, Billy.
Yeah, great episode, man. Good time.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. How is it possible this is only chapter 8? It's so amazing. I mean, it's not like any break. It's just ruthless escalation. It's like, and I'm not asking for a break. Thank you for not providing. I'm so happy these books never provide a break, but it's one thing I love about his stuff, man. But it's a fantastic episode, and I can't wait till next week's episode too.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into some interesting stuff. It looks like this chapter is gonna take 3 weeks to get through. Three parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we dragged this thing out to an hour and a half somehow.
Yeah. I know it.
Pages. Yeah.
I know it. I'm blown away. Great episode though.
All right, everybody. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Thank y'all so much.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we'd really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.